Hello, I'm Chris Beachum, managing editor of Gold Derby, here with Ron Howard, the director and producer of Jim Henson Idea Man, the latest documentary on Disney Plus. Ron, what was your first encounter seeing or hearing about Jim Henson and the Muppets?
Well, of course, I was a fan and aware of this movement and what it meant to Sesame Street, and I did cross paths with him one time backstage at this sort of crazy primetime live variety show that ABC was trying to hatch as a regular series. They didn't wind up continuing with it, but we were both guests on it, and for a brief moment we kind of intersected. At first I thought they were a rock and roll band because they all kind of came in with bandanas and long hair and beards and stuff like that. And then I was told that no, that's the Muppet Troupe. And I had a brief conversation with Jim. He was nothing but gracious. For that, whatever it was, 8-10 seconds, you really felt like you were connecting with a good guy. And that was always his reputation. But I didn't know much more than that, really, other than just being a fan of his work, until I began to get into a conversation about possibly doing a documentary about Jim's life and looking at these archives, which were surprising and hilarious and so inventive and experimental and interesting, beyond the sort of the greatest hits of the characters that we know who are, so iconic.
You're well known for all of your narrative features, and you've done several documentaries as well. What is it like for you from a technical and preparation standpoint when you're getting ready for a documentary as opposed to a narrative?
Well, it's look, there's some similarities. I'm always research heavy because I take inspiration from that. Even if I'm working in fiction, I still tend to do a lot of research and ask the production department and the wardrobe department and people to come up with real examples of what things could be or could look like. When you're doing something based on reality, it's much easier, but you do an even deeper dive. So that prep is kind of similar. But with a documentary, even when it's a story of a life and you kind of know what the narrative shape's going to be more or less, there are so many twists and turns creatively in terms of like, what is the information you're going to get that you can really share with audiences? What's going to come from an interview? What archival footage are you going to really find once you start looking? And you can't know that until you're pretty deep into the process. So there's a kind of trust that you have to develop, that you and the team are gonna find the story that audiences will believe is engaging and be excited about. Whereas with scripted, you don't really go in until you think you have that story figured out. You could be wrong, you could have to make decisions and changes down the road, but at least you think you know exactly what it is you're making.
As you went into the archives and all of you were looking at everything, what was a specific clip or a moment that either took you by surprise or really excited you, thinking, I can't wait till people see this?
Well, there were really two, I gotta say. One is his experimental films, particularly Timepiece, which he was nominated for an Academy Award for. But it so immediately informed two things: the sort of sensibility and the aesthetic that I wanted to try to build for our documentary, to try to infuse the documentary with a sense of Jim, and Jim's creativity and his sensibility. The other was this yearning that he had as an individual, this feeling that he was in a race against time. And I mean, that's literally what the film's about, but it's also how he lived. And as one of the kids say, and I think we have the quote, I know we have the quote in the documentary, she says, if you want to know my dad, if you want to understand him, look at Timepiece. And it was just so revealing. So there's that. That was big. The other thing were these short form comedy bits that he did for late night TV on the local station, and then commercials. And they were so raw and so funny and kind of outrageous. But they felt, in a way, to me, like what a social media content creator would do, on TikTok or something. Just throw stuff out there and see how audiences responded and develop their own voice. And I had no idea about all this stuff, and it's hilarious. There's a lot of it in the documentary, but not nearly enough. I wish I just I mean, watching that section of the archive reel just was a thrill and a blast.
Having grown up on Sesame Street, I had no idea that he was the director behind all of those early
Correct.
the number shorts.
Yeah, that was a big surprise for me too. And of course, I really loved those, and I was taken by them when I first saw them. And then as my kids started watching Sesame Street, those are the moments when I'd want to sit down next to them and watch the show and get hooked, because these great little number counting and alphabet shorts that he made. And I didn't know it was him. I thought he'd brought the Muppets to Sesame Street, but I had no idea how much he'd actually influenced the style of that program. But again, what was interesting to me was all of it went back to his experimental work. I mean, the actual experimental films that he made about the journey through a man's mind, or Timepiece, where it's a guy running out of time, or even his home movies with his kids. They look like those little short films that he later would make for Sesame Street. So he was just nonstop, full throttle creativity all the time. And we're the beneficiaries of that.
I don't know about you. I kind of feel like you're going to be the same way as I am on this front. I'm a nerd about graphics and fonts and all that. Whenever I watch movies, I love it when they're creative. And even when I'm watching like the Oscars or the Emmys, and they just go out of their way to be creative. And your film is so creative on graphics and the look of it and the presentation of it. How important was that to you, and how did you settle on that style?
Well, it was important, and it was sort of an early decision that I made, that I wanted to infuse the film with as much of Jim's sensibility as I possibly could. And our creative team, got excited about that idea and really ran with it. Jim was an introvert. He didn't love doing interviews. He didn't do a lot of them. Jane did even fewer. So to try to get Jim especially, and Jane, into the film as much as possible, we decided to adopt this aesthetic. But also, he did this experimental TV show called The Cube, which I had never heard of, but it all takes place inside of a cube. And one of us got the idea that we should use the cube as our interview space. And so we did. But one thing led to another, and we started using the cube as like a series of TV screens and ways to put images up behind them and keep the kind of visual excitement and energy and density of the film really going, again, in the spirit of Jim Henson. So it all came out of character, and the font selections were all inspired by, for the most part, Jim's Red Book, where he himself would make little doodles and little drawings, and mostly just keep track of his diary and all the things that he'd accomplished over the course of a year. So I wish I could take more credit for all of that, but I certainly took inspiration from Jim and learned something along the way, which is what I really like about my career at this point, moving back and forth between the docs and the movies that I direct. And then when you throw in all the things that are going on at Imagine Entertainment, it's really thick with creativity, different sensibilities, and different creative problems and challenges. So it's been a really exciting and rich period for me.
Well, I want to shout out your editor too, because this was one of the best edited projects I've seen of any type, any kind of television or movies in a long time.
So,
Can you talk about how you wanted to structure?
well, two editors, Sierra and Paul, and they were great. Paul I've worked with before, the Beatles documentary and Pavarotti, and he's great with music. He's a drummer himself. So Jim's editorial style, which was so syncopated and so determined by music, even though he wasn't really a musician himself, that was right down Paul's alley, and so that was the direction that we followed. But it was incredibly demanding. However, um, Paul has a real knack for creating scenes just using photographs, audio tapes, anything that he can kludge together to sort of build a relationship between the audience and the characters, but also even relationships between the characters themselves. And because Jim and Jane were both a little reluctant to be interviewed all that much, that became very important. Of course, we had great interviews early on. Frank Oz was the first major interview, and it really set the tone. It not only revealed a lot about Jim, his heart, that push and pull between sort of that creative impulses and his desire to be just a good guy and a good family man. That became so clear, and we all picked up on that. But again, this idea of a kind of an inner turmoil or kind of paradox there, and a tension, and that also really informed the editorial patterns and rhythms.
I was about to bring up Frank Oz. I was so happy he was in this. I don't think the documentary would have been nearly as good without him, because I always think of them together. They played so many characters that were duos.
Yeah. In fact, if you just think of them as a comedy team, given all the different relationships, whether it's, Fozzie Bear and Kermit, Miss Piggy and Kermit, or Bert and Ernie, they're a great comedy team. They were just, one of the all-time greats, and their timing was just impeccable. And it was great to get underneath that, and sort of get a sense of how over a period of years they developed that rapport and that creative trust. And we have a lot of great behind the scenes shots of these guys. I mean, it's demanding, physically jamming themselves into these impossibly uncomfortable situations, and then being funny and improvising.
Another interview, you had Jennifer Connelly. I liked knowing just in my brain that, hey, these two are reuniting, you and Jennifer, who you helped to win an Oscar many years ago. And she helped you to win an Oscar many years ago for the same movie. What was it like seeing her again?
Well, it was great, and we've remained friends. And she's married to Paul Bettany, and who I've worked with, numerous times. And so we've kept up over the years, which has been great. And when I asked her about it, she just beamed. She just had such a great experience working as a 13, 14-year-old on Labyrinth, and she was, happy, really happy to participate in it, and brought a lot to it. And it was just great to recognize how much fun and how defining an experience like that can be for a young person if it's handled professionally and thoughtfully. It was definitely a life-changing experience for her.
Do you have a favorite Jim Henson project from all of his career?
Oh man, I really do like the experimental stuff, because I recognized how cutting edge it is. But I think those Muppet episodes are jewels. When I went back and actually started watching these 25-minute episodes, I mean, they just rock. They're smart. They're you laugh out loud. And of course they utilize their amazing lineup of guest stars so well. We have a couple of those situations, as Rita Moreno doing Fever. So I would say, as much as I love the movies and as much as Sesame Street meant a lot to me and the family, I just think those Muppet episodes are just absolute gems. I really recommend people go back and find them and have a look.
Did you ever appear with the Muppets on anything?
Never with the Muppets. No, Henry and I did a learning piece for Sesame Street, but we did it just on the set of Happy Days. And so I remember being a little bummed that I didn't get to hang out with any of the Muppets that day.
We did a photo gallery last year. I think it may have been around Jim Henson's birthday, ranking our favorite Muppets. And I think, most people would say Kermit, and I think that was who we had in first place. Do you have a favorite Muppet?
Well, I'm afraid I'm in the Kermit camp. I just relate to him so well. I mean, he was he was Jim Henson's alter ego for a reason. And Kermit was kind of a pretty nice guy. You know, once in a while he'd lose it, but he tried to hang on to his sanity in and around this madcap world that he was trying to help make sense of. And so I kind of view the world that way as I think Jim did. So I definitely relate to that. You know, Rolf's funny, and that's actually the first Muppet that I was aware of without knowing that there was anything called Muppets. On that Jimmy Dean show when I was a kid. You know, he did these great bits with Jimmy Dean, and and that was funny. And I just have a soft spot for and a lot of admiration for Big Bird because he's remarkable achievement as a puppet, of which we talk a little bit about in our film, but also I just just the way he looks and his vibe. I always appreciated Big Bird.
Who would have ever guessed as a kid, not knowing what was really going on, that Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch were the same person?
Yeah, never. No way. Just as I wouldn't have known all the characters Frank Oz did, and Jim for that matter, because these puppets transport you. You know, I mean, they really do become characters, and they've continued to be. You know, and it's been a lot of fun sharing the movie. We've had some screenings now, and so you can feel an audience connecting with Jim and Jane's story, but also with these characters and their own origin stories. And it's been a lot of fun to see audiences hear what they laugh at and sense the emotion that they feel during the course of the movie too.
I wanted to wrap up with a non Jim Henson question. We did a gallery also back in January on the 50th anniversary of Happy Days and ranking our favorite episodes. And I wonder, when the show started, it was a slow build. When did you and everybody on the show know that it wasn't just a regular everyday sitcom anymore, but it was a phenomenon?
Wow, I really think it was kind of as we hit our stride in that third season, which we'd been a single camera show for the first couple of years. And I don't remember particular episodes, but somewhere early, we did 24 episodes at that time. Somewhere around episode 5, 6, 7, the scripts were just getting so tight and good. And Henry was exploding, and the fans were just loving that and sort of loving the vibe of the show and all of our characters in a way. And you could feel it even shooting with the audience, the 300 audience members that came to watch us film it live-ish, in front of a studio audience. It was in the, and then we started climbing up the ratings. But first we felt it with those 300 people, I think, sort of episode 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there.
Our number one in the rankings was the Christmas episode where you figure out that Fonzie's not really going out of town. He's all alone.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, that's great to hear. That's great to hear.
I have to watch that every Christmas. I really do.
Well, thank you.
Last question. I want to ask you something Oscar related. I know you've been an Academy member forever. When you joined, were you in the acting branch or did you wait till you were in the directing branch?
I was in the acting branch, but then I shifted over to the
Oh, okay.
later on.
I wonder how many people have done that
I don't know.
successfully.
I don't know. Well, it continues to be, a really cool tradition. And I feel like that almost more than ever, as movies kind of struggle to redefine themselves and in kind of in the zeitgeist, and that the award shows, I know we have a lot of them, but also the film festivals just remain important opportunities, not only for the community to come together, but also to do what the award shows were always intended to do, which is kind of cut through the clutter and let audiences and fans out there know, what at least we thought was some of the better work that was being done.
Well, I know you're a big movie fan and you really appreciate the art of it. Is there been a movie or two or three in the past few years that you just were wowed by?
you know, I mean, Oppenheimer was a tremendous achievement. I thought just a great movie, but I think, you know, Everywhere All at Once was remarkable. But I mean, I'm leaving out movies that I really liked because you know, even though it's kind of a struggle, it's a struggle for studios and independent financiers to know kind of what to bet on and all of that. I think somehow that pressure has done a really good thing in that people are making interesting work, and I think the awards candidates reflect that. I feel like that the last few years we've had a lot of interesting movies from all around the world that you know that we're going to remember, that'll be cited and thought about, talked about for you know, a long time when filmmakers are thinking about what they want to try to do next and what they want to aspire to achieve, you know, and also fans.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the documentary. I hope everybody will watch Jim Henson Idea Man on Disney Plus, which is just now starting to stream on there. And Ron, thank you so much. Great work.
You bet. Thank you. Appreciate it. Nice talking to you.